few hours, we're going to celebrate, we're going to commemorate one of the happiest moments in Jewish history, the holiday of Purim. What happened on Purim? There is a book called the Book of Esther, part of the Bible. That book was very controversial for our ancestors when they tried to establish what is the canon of the Bible, which books will conform the Bible. There was, of course, the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. There was, of course, the writings of the prophets, called prophets, and then general writings, including Psalms, for instance, the Song of Songs. And one of the items was the Book of Esther. What was the problem with the Book of Esther? One basic problem. God isn't mentioned in the Book of Esther. Now, how can you possibly have a religious book without God's name? So a rabbi said, you know what? God is really present at all times in the happenings of the Book of Esther. Were it not for God working behind the scenes, nothing would have happened. As a matter of fact, our rabbis say, where do you find a hint of the name Esther in the Torah? Esther min Torah minayin. They say there is a pasuk, there is a versicle that says, "Ve'anochi aster astir et panai." I am going to hide my face. So actually, God was behind the scenes, but He was present at all times. What does this book tell us? This book tells us that there was a king by the name of Achashverosh. He was apparently a usurper of the kingdom. A coup d'etat. He deposed the king that was previous to him, and he married the widow, as was done in those days, and she became the queen. And in order to congratiate himself with all the important people in the kingdom, he made an enormous party that never finished, so to speak. And during those celebrations, he asked that the queen, Vashti was her name, should come forth, and he wanted to show her off to everybody else that she is the queen, he is legitimate. Maybe because of that, the queen didn't want to come, and she refused to come. So one of the councils of the king said, how is it possible that the queen does not listen to what the king says? What kind of example is that for the country? No woman will want to listen to her husband now. We must get rid of her. And they got rid of her. But now there was no queen. So what are we going to do? Well, they had a beauty contest. And the king was going to select a new queen. There was a man by the name of Mordechai who knew the corridors of the palace apparently quite well. He had a cousin by the name of Esther. She was, according to the Talmud, she was his wife. And he divorced her in order for her to participate in this beauty contest. There was a great poet, I think Heinrich Heine, once said, what if Esther would have had a wart on her nose? She wouldn't have become queen, and every result of this story would have been totally different. So everything was a question of luck, really. It wasn't a sequence of natural events. Well, Esther was selected as the queen. At that time, the Megillah, which is the name we usually use for the book of Esther, relates that there was a man by the name of Haman that became very important in the kingdom, second to the king. And everybody had to bow before this Haman. Mordechai refused to do so. Why did he refuse to do so? Maybe he felt he was a competition. Maybe Mordechai felt that he should have been selected instead of Haman. Or, as our rabbis say, this Haman had a little effigy on his chest, a little idol. And if Mordechai would have bowed before him, it would have been tantamount to worshiping idols. So he didn't want to do it. Well, Haman didn't like that at all. He wanted to take vengeance upon this Mordechai. And when he found out that Mordechai was Jewish, he wanted to take vengeance upon the entire Jewish people, not only Mordechai. He came forth to the king with a plan. He said, because apparently there was a cash flow problem in the kingdom at the time, he said, there is a people that is dispersed all over. There were 127 provinces. This Persia was enormous. This king was all-powerful. And he said, they are all over, and they don't listen to what the king says. But he's the second non-Jew in the Bible that calls the Jewish people a people. The first one to call the Jews a people was really Pharaoh. Pharaoh said that. And Haman says the same thing. There's a people. The Jews, they're different from all the others. We got to get rid of them, and this way we're going to solve the financial problems of the kingdom. Well, he drew lots. The king said, okay, he drew lots in order to ascertain, determine when is the day that was going to happen. and it turned out to be the 13th day of the month of Adar, the Jewish month of Adar. Well, when Mordechai heard that, he immediately went to Esther and he said, you have to do something, you have to save us. They're going to kill all of us on the 13th of Adar. Go to the king. So Esther said, I haven't been called by the king for some time. And if you come before the king without being called, you may be killed yourself. So Mordechai said, maybe that is the reason why you won this contest and you became queen, to save the Jewish people. And if salvation won't come through you, it'll come through some other corner. Well, Esther said, well, let every member of the Jewish family now fast for 3 days, plead with God, and I'm going to go to the king. And she actually went to see the king and said to the king, why don't you come for dinner to my place? And she said she wants Haman to come too. On the second dinner, she said to the king, if it were a question of slavery, I wouldn't bother the king. But this man Haman, this bad man Haman, wants to kill me and my people. The king was astounded to hear something like that. How can that be possible? Haman started imploring the queen, and he fell upon the queen. When king saw that he's on top of the queen, he immediately became infuriated, and he said, well, we are going to get rid of Haman and his entire family, and they were all hung. And Mordechai now came instead of Haman. Mordechai and Esther went to the king. What are we going to do? The 13th of Adar is still valid. They're going to kill all the Jews. Well, the king said, once I give an edict, it cannot be taken back. That doesn't sound quite right. Maybe what the king was trying to do is, let's see what's going on. But he said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to let the Jews arm themselves. Let them defend themselves. And actually, on the 13th day of Adar, our entire people started fasting, praying to God. That's why we fast the day before Purim, praying to God that we should come out victorious. And eventually it was so. The Jewish people were victorious. Tremendous celebration. Well, they were victorious because God helped us also, of course, and they helped themselves. So what are we celebrating on the 14th? We should be celebrating on the 13th. The victory was on the 13th. But we don't celebrate, apparently, miracles. God helped us. Our ancestors were victorious. Because you find in the Bible, we celebrate some miracles. The firstborn Jews were not killed on the 10th plague. They were saved. God sent plagues and our ancestors went out into freedom. The waters of the Red Sea parted. We celebrate those events. But if we want to celebrate every miracle that happened to the Jewish people, we'd have a holiday every day. As a matter of fact, our rabbis say the whole world is a miracle. If it weren't for God, the world would have no existence. Every day he renews the existence of the world. So what are we celebrating on the 14th, really? Well, our ancestors on the 14th did something. It's called Kimu Vekiblu. They reaffirmed their loyalty to the Torah. They came to the conclusion that the assimilation, the fact that they went to Achashverosh's party, the fact that they dressed like all the Persians did. For instance, why didn't Haman realize immediately when he saw Mordechai that Mordechai was Jewish? When he heard that Mordechai was Jewish, he didn't recognize that he was wearing Jewish clothes. Apparently, Mordechai wasn't wearing any such thing. No tzitzis that you could see. There was no apparent sign that his clothing is different from any other Persian. As a matter of fact, his name, Mordechai, is not a Jewish name. It became a Jewish name after him. But at the time, that's a Persian name. Esther is not a Jewish name. It's the name of some kind of idol that the Persians worship. Her Hebrew name, the book of Esther says, was Hadassah. They were assimilated. And they realized that when problems came and occurred in the kingdom, they are still persecuted. They're still a scapegoat. In order to solve a problem, you can do anything to the Jews. That assimilation is not the way to go. You know what is the way to go? The way to go is to be Amecha, to be one people. When we are together, then we can face off any enemy. Take a look. There are additional mitzvot on Purim. What are they? You have to interchange food with your neighbors, with your friends. That's called mishloach manot. in order to bring the people closer together. You have to give help to the poor. Once again, closer to the people. You have a Seudat Purim. Your entire family sits together and eats. We realize that when we are one people, then we are strong. So they Kimu vekiblu, they once again reaffirmed. But wasn't that done years ago, centuries ago, with Moses at Mount Sinai? Well, what could a people that had come out of slavery really know about freedom and these things? They were offered the Torah. Well, that's what they took. They didn't have any experiences in order to say this is better than something else. As a matter of fact, the Talmud says, you know what happened there? God took Mount Sinai, picked it up, and put it on top of our people and said, either you accept the Torah or else I drop it on top of you and you all die there. In other words, they were coerced. It wasn't by their free will that they accepted the Torah. How is it possible to impose a Torah against the will of the people? Maybe what God was saying is the following. There is no alternative to Torah. If there is no law, if there is no morality, if there are no ethics, it's impossible to live. Your property won't be yours. You'll be afraid you'll be killed. You won't be able to go out into the street. You'll never feel secure. Society can only flourish when there is law. Maybe that's what they're saying. And maybe that is the important thing, that on Purim, when our ancestors accepted the Torah again, this time they knew already what the alternatives are. This time they were aware that assimilation, other forms, won't take him any place. It's only the union of the Jewish people that is the factor that is most important in the cohesion, in our being able to fend off any kind of enemy. So I want to wish you all a very happy Purim in company of your family, and to know that on Purim we once again reaffirmed our eternal commitment to the Torah.